ahead and call the meeting to order. This December 3rd, 2020 Plan Commission meeting. Would someone like to say the Pledge of Allegiance for us?
Sure, I'll do it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Andy, is this being recorded?
Oh, I'll start it right now. Thank you for reminding me.
Hey, I always forget.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, Pat.
Unmute, Pat.
There we go. We've got you, Pat.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Denise, would you please do the roll call?
Sandra Hash,
Here.
Terry Baker,
Here.
Don Calvert,
Here.
David Drake,
Here.
Pam Samples,
Here.
Dan Swafford,
Here.
Pat Wesolowski.
Here.
Dr. Jerry Sanders, I'm getting the notice that school's been canceled for a while longer. Okay, on the agenda tonight, it is just discussion of possible changes to the codes.
Excuse me,
And-
Sandy.
Go ahead, Denise, I'm sorry.
Can you do a motion to table the minutes, please?
Okay, and this was for what meeting?
November 5th.
November 5th. I had to look, sorry.
Okay, when can we expect to start getting some minutes?
Hopefully some by the next meeting. You know, I was out for a little while.
Yeah, okay, so could I have a motion to table the passing of the minutes from November the 5th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote. Denise?
Sandra Hash,
Yes.
Terry Baker,
Yes.
Don Calvert,
Yes.
David Drake,
Yes.
Pam Samples,
Yes.
Dan Swafford,
Yes.
Pat Wesolowski.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I did not print an agenda out before the meeting. So Kevin, would you care to guide me a little bit? What's next on the agenda?
Next is the conflict of interest statement, but we're not really discussing anything anyone should have a conflict with, so we can move past that. And no old business. The only new business is the zoning code discussion.
And I think the person that had something they wanted to talk about, there was a few of us had some ideas, but David Drake has had one for a long while. So David, do you want to go ahead and explain that part of the code that you'd like to change?
Well, I don't think we actually have anything even to change. We just need to add in there a section about putting a time limit on how long development plans are good for. And I have no idea what the areas around us have. I was thinking I saw somewhere between 5 and 10 years for some when I looked before, but I'm not sure.
I'm
Kevin,
thinking from.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'd say from my past experience, I want to say it was around 2 years we had for an expiration. I'll check.
That's even better.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll check around to see what some others do. There's a few other things we need expirations for too. Some of our permits, the grading permits, driveway permits, and our
And
plats.
would that apply to development plans that have already been approved? I mean, would they, I guess what I'm trying to say is if one had been approved 5 years ago and we made it now 2 years, would that make that one expire right then, or would they have another 2 years?
I think I may have to defer to Darla on this, but my thought would be to put in some sort of language that would give them probably 6 months to a year if they've had one that's been longer than what our time period's going to be to figure out what they're going to do, and then everything after that would fall under the expiration. I'm trying to think how many we have right now that are over a year old.
I think you would have to give them some notice before you cut them off. So,
But we wouldn't have to give them the entire 2 years.
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
you just have to give them some fair notice, whether it's 6 months or 9 months or something to start the development.
So
And I'm not on video. Oh, I'm not on video because Dan always makes fun of me laying on the couch in my t-shirt.
well, we want you to be comfy, David.
Oh, I got a
Um,
question on that, the 2 years. So let's say we put in 2 years, excuse me. They already have the authorization from us that they can build, okay? What, does anything stop them from coming in and saying, okay, I want to renew this for another 2 years? Because they've already been approved. How can we not approve them if they've been approved once?
Well,
And I agree with, I agree with the 2 years, don't be wrong. I just want to play the devil's advocate here. Can they come back in and say, okay, I want to redo it for another 2 years now?
yeah, we do that right now with preliminary plats. If work isn't started within a year, they can come back before the planning commission and ask for, I can't remember if it's a 12 or 18-month extension.
Okay, then maybe, and Darla, this might be naturally for you, but shouldn't there be some type of language in there, how many times they can come back and ask for the same development?
Sure. I think we can put some language in there. Just let us know what you're thinking.
Because if not, they can keep coming back, I would assume.
They could
Am I
ask.
incorrect?
I mean, they could ask with the way the plats
I mean, they
are
can ask.
described.
No.
Well, and that brings up another question, and this one's probably for Darla too. What if the conditions have changed since they received the first development plan? Let's say, for example, that something has been changed in what the approved uses are for a particular zoning classification. Would they then be subject to those new changes?
Well, I guess it would depend on what the changes are, but I would say probably not, because the development plan that was approved is the one that the contractor is required to go forward with. You know, if it's an ADA issue or something, okay, yeah, maybe. But if it's anything other than that, my gut tells me no, David, but I guess I would have to know more detail about what's changed.
Well, let's take, for example, apartments were automatically considered a approved use for, say, a C3 zone, and that's no longer the case. Would, once their development plan expires,
So you mean by the time they're developed? Right.
that last part cut out.
Well, once it's expired, yeah, that's okay. If it's expired, I mean, a lot of this stuff is fact sensitive, obviously, but I would argue that if the development plan is expired and the contractor or the developer has started no work on it, and somewhere in there, there's been a change in use so that they cannot now build those apartments, I would say the developer is stuck with that. I mean, once it's expired, I would argue.
Okay, well, that's kind of what my thought was, but
I
I
think we
wasn't
should just make it clear in the code so the developer's not caught unaware, because that's where you get into trouble, I think, with the appellate courts, is if the developer feels as if he or they or it has been, I don't want to say treated unfairly, but if they feel like they haven't been advised of all that they should be advised of. So we may not have to put any language in our code to that effect that, hey, if you blow the deadline, you're done, but it won't hurt to put that language in there and just make them start all over again. And if they start all over again with the process and what they want to do is no longer permitted by the code, then I'd say that's the developer's problem.
Okay, yep, that answers my question. Thanks.
So if the time runs out and they come back for an extension to Kevin, can he grant the extension without coming to the planning commission again, or does it have to come to the planning commission?
I would rather not do that
No.
on my own. The way the plats are, those would come through plan commission for renewal.
Okay.
But I still think we should have some type of language where they can't keep drawing it out.
Right, put a time limit, say.
I think one renewal's plenty.
And that's how we do it with subdivision plats. They're allowed just the one renewal. I don't have the code in front of me. It's in the subdivision chapter, but it's written in a way they can come back one time for a renewal and that's it.
So Kevin, if we put this into effect, how many are outstanding right now that this would affect? Any?
Maybe a couple. I'd have to go back and look and see which ones are out. I mean, the ones, there's a couple I can think of that were approved and then new plans have already been approved in the same location. So I don't think those would be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Darla, if we have a time limit on it, and I have, I'm a developer, and I come in and ask for an extension. Now, when I got my first approval, there was no restrictions on how long it would take for me to build. Am I grandfathered in so I don't have to come back all the time?
I think probably not. Like I said, I think you need to give the developer some time to understand that the code has been changed and that they now have a time limit to get it done. I don't think you can just cut them off at the knees and say, okay, we've changed the code and because you didn't get your development started done. But as long as we give them fair notice, I would say they're not grandfathered in.
Would this?
I mean, what's being grandfathered in? They haven't started anything. So.
But the code was, well, when they came in for the development, weren't they automatically grandfathered in?
I would argue no, Pat.
Okay, I'm just asking the question.
Well, Kevin, does that give you some guidelines on where to start with presenting us a change or addition to the code?
Oh, definitely. I can work with that and put something together probably pretty easily for what I think the Plan Commission would like.
Okay. And then if I remember correctly, at the end of the last meeting, we talked about maybe our downward facing lighting could stand some improvement in the code and the landscaping. Does anybody remember talking about that?
Yes, I remember.
do.
You know, every meeting or every development we end up with, the plans come in and they show landscaping on there. And they show lighting, but like you said, they don't show a downward lighting, or they don't, I don't think we have anything that tells them what type of landscaping that we approve or disapprove of.
Well, that used to be in our code a long time ago, but I think it got dropped somewhere along the line. But it was in there that it had to be downward lighting. It could not be, wide area lighting.
And used to, the town would come contract with the electric company and have the electric company put up street lights. But when it went to Duke Energy, that became cost prohibitive for the town. Before, they would put up the pole and the fixture and just charge us a monthly rental fee for the lighting. And that was very affordable. But now they want us to pay for the pole and the installation of the pole and the light fixture and the upkeep. So since that, we haven't been putting streetlights in the additions, and it's just whatever the developer decides to do. So I know, like in Union Valley Farms, when all the houses were new, they put dusted on lights on the garage, and so everybody's lights came on, and that helped a lot. In my addition, originally everybody had a yard light, but we do have street lights. They're not very many, but there's a few. And so I don't know, should we encourage the developers to put in some kind of street lights, decorative street lights? Would that be cost prohibitive for them also? And I think more the downward lighting is affects commercial development more than residential, actually. Do you agree?
I think.
Andy, how long ago have we talked to Duke about the lighting?
It's been a while.
It might behoove somebody to give them a jingle, and they might have changed their program too. We never know.
That is true. And PSI would always give us a 10-year agreement, and it was really a good agreement. But that was when Prominence Point was going in. Prominence Point was the first subdivision that we did not put streets in. Do you know about the year that started, Kevin? I can't remember. And it was before you, so.
I have no idea.
Yeah. I would say it's been a decade. Easily. But I mean, I don't mind to call Duke and ask them about the streetlights.
They might have a different program today than they had 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever.
Usually once it goes up, it doesn't go back down, but hey,
Yeah.
It wouldn't hurt to ask.
And I think the downward lighting should apply to everything,
Oh, I do too.
not just the street lights. It ought to apply to, if I put a light up out here on my side yard, it ought to be mandatory that it be a down facing light, not radiating out into everywhere.
I don't know if any of you have noticed the one at the west side, the little grocery on the west side. When you enter Ellettsville at night, that light really shines like a beacon.
Almost blinds you.
Yeah.
I got one right in my backyard, does the same thing, called Little League Ballpark. It's got a light on the concession stand that it lights up everybody's houses.
And it comes on every night.
Uh-huh.
And I know they probably installed that because they've had so many thefts down there.
Yeah, it's just part of the game there.
But it would be
No
nice if
pun
it was more contained to the area.
Well, Kevin, in your experience, have you ever requested the developer to put street lights in or some type of lighting?
I don't honestly remember that happening.
Excuse me.
And I'm trying to think from newer subdivisions whether they have streetlights in them or not, and I'm drawing a blank.
Well, I know Union Valley Farms does not. That one that was going to be the Meadows of Union Valley or something, the one that just finished up, that comes, you have to go through Union Valley Farms to get to it.
Oh, Hidden Meadow.
Hidden Meadow. They put up their own decorative lights, but Union Valley Farms doesn't have street lights, and Prominence Point doesn't, and none of the newer subdivisions have them.
Well, who pays for the lights? The people in that subdivision, Sandy?
Well, whenever when they finished the Union Valley Farm that had, Kevin, I've already forgotten the name of it.
Hidden Meadow.
Hidden Meadow. I'm going to write that down. When they finished Hidden Meadow, the contractor came in and brought the information, and we changed the lights over. The developer paid for the light cost until the project was finished, and then we just paid the electrical use.
Who's we? The town or?
The town, yes. Yeah, the town pays for all the community streetlights every month. So all the ones that are those little decorative lights through town that they put up with the new highway, we get the light bill on all of those, and all of the big street lights we pay for. And it costs us about $35,000 a year.
Do any of those use LED lights?
Well, you know, on the big ones, we're at the mercy of the Duke. They still maintain those for us, and they'll, like, if a light goes out, I can call a toll-free number and Duke will come out and replace the bulb. I don't know what they're replacing it with. The ones that we have downtown, the decorative lights, when those went up, we maintain those. So we do all the maintenance on them. And we just last year changed those all over to LED. Is there any other discussion on the downward pointing lighting? Kevin, can you help us with that one too and put forth some suggested language in the proper place?
That will be a little more intensive, and I think we're kind of looking at two different things between the street lights and commercial lighting.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, I can put something together. We don't even have anything on lighting right now, so everything will be from scratch. But I'll look at. Go ahead.
Is there anything we can do to help you?
No, I think it takes some research to try and figure out how to write it, how to measure it. I mean, it's easy to write the standards for it. It's very difficult for us to monitor and check into complaints. A lot of times what the lighting ordinances will have things measured in foot candles at different spots, which isn't exactly easy, nor do we have equipment on hand to do that.
Well, is it something we can request at construction and then hope for the best? Or, I mean, we can make them install it like we like, but I guess maintaining it could be an issue.
Yeah, and there are a few development plans we get in that have I forget what they're called, but they'll show foot candles all around the property. And they're usually right at 0 or 0.1 at the property line.
So is it more like apartment complexes like Senior Citizens and the Government Square or whatever that's called, and that type? I mean, houses aren't doing that, right? Subdivisions?
No, it's just commercial projects.
Yeah. Well, if there is something you can put together, we'd sure appreciate it.
Okay, I can. That'll probably be a little bit longer, but definitely work on it.
And then the last thing that I know that I remember is the landscaping. And I think, Kevin, you're the one that brought it up that we didn't have a lot of detail in our landscaping plans. And the one thing that worries me a bit, I really like the street trees, but to put street trees between the sidewalks and the curb makes root problems eventually. Every little tree grows up to be a really big tree someday, and they destroy sidewalks and road curbs. So is that our best place to put trees? Should we ask for them somewhere else?
Well, Sandy, too, the other thing is you got to think about branches hanging down over the sidewalk. I mean, you know, I see that across the street from me. I mean, you got to walk out and around the sidewalk in order to not get into a tree.
And the school buses, I drove a school bus, and when the tree is close to the road, those tree branches hit your windshield and your side mirrors. So, I mean, although they look beautiful, I'm not sure that's the best place for them.
Yeah, well, and two, you know, you've also got your utilities that go up the sides of the road. So that gets into that. Somebody's got to cut those. And then the property owner's not happy when they get cut because they don't like that. So, you know, I think that's definitely a problem.
Well, you know, I'm looking at it differently. I'm looking at, and we're doing it now. We're getting business into town, and I'm looking at around the businesses, the buildings itself. I'm not looking at the street trees or in the housing developments per se, because the homeowner is going to put in what they want for their own likes. But you take like out here that Cahey. If I remember correctly, we had no provisions of any type of landscaping to be done out there. And that's what I'm looking at is buildings, or like the two that are just going into coffee shops. Are we just going to have square buildings sitting out there? The storage sheds coming in on 46. Is there going to be anything around there to complement the town? That's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at housing developments. Like, you know, I'll put red bushes in front of my house, and if I bought it and had evergreens, you know, I could change it.
Well, I think we currently require street trees between the sidewalks and the trees. That's what my concern was, causing problems down the road. I do agree with you on the commercial properties too, though.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. You know, and I agree with you there. I had to cut a tree down by my house here because the roots were growing underneath my sidewalk. And I agree with you there, Sandy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's, I don't know if there's a bush or anything you could put between there to compensate for the street trees or not.
Well,
Kevin,
again, I think this comes down to the kind of two different discussions. The commercial landscaping, I think, is what I was concerned with as well, in that we tell people they need to have it, but we don't tell them anything about what they need to have. So it's
correct.
Kind of we get all sorts of things. Some are good and some are just the bare minimum. That's kind of where I'd like to have some standards. And the other issue is just in streetscape as a whole. When you look at the right of way, where the sidewalks are, where utilities are located, lighting, if we have that, trees, or whether they're big trees or ornamental trees or something else, or if I would like to see on-street parking at some point, just because we have all sorts of issues with people. Once they run out of room in their driveway, they have nowhere else to park but in their yard, and then that turns into a headache for our department. And but they're all, and those things are all interconnected. And I think that's something we need to look at. What do we want our subdivisions to look like? Do we do we want to tell developers this is what we want, or do you want to leave it to developers to just put it in, figure out what they would like to have and figure out what works for them?
I think to some degree, we need to make some suggestions and requirements.
Well,
I don't want it to be overkill. Monroe County is overkill, I've heard.
Yeah, they are.
And the other thing, we need to be sure that they're not putting in invasive trees and stuff, because there are some of those trees that are not good for the everything going on.
We have a street tree ordinance that prohibits invasive trees.
Okay.
So they should not, I do check that when they submit plans. Now,
So are
what they
you-
put in afterwards, I don't know.
Are you then, so the trees that they're like, they're in the meadows of Deer Run, that's all under new development. And I've noticed little trees going up along the roadway. So they're doing trees that are small ornamental trees.
I honestly don't remember what they put up there. And I'm
They're
not sure
small
why
now.
they have those. Yeah, they are now. I don't know why those are in when they haven't built any of the houses yet, because I can tell you quite a few of those are going to get destroyed when they start building at the other end of the road. But my thought for subdivisions would be developers have an idea, and I've talked to different developers, and some like street trees, some don't. Some want the trees back in the yard, some want on-street parking, some don't, some want to move the sidewalks back and forth. They all have different ideas, and I don't have a problem with that. I think that gives some diversity, but figuring out what it is they want to do and then making sure they do it in a way that is going to be, that something that's going to work for the town, so they're not tearing up sidewalks with the tree roots and things like that.
It's so funny that you want on-street parking, because we have worked so hard in the past on parking and trying to increase the number of spots that when they build houses, the number of spots they have to have, because, you know, when you build a new home, you usually are, you know, maybe just have one child or just newly married. And in 15 years or 17, you may have 3 children or 4, and all of them are getting ready to drive. And then all of a sudden, a 2-car family goes to a 6-car family, and there's no place for them to park. And this has been an ongoing problem for years and years. I do think our streets look really nice with no cars on them compared to the street I grew up in Bloomington on West 4th Street. They always parked on one side, and still you have to, it's a traffic calming device, because you can't really cross 2 vehicles. If there's parked cars, you have to wait for an alley and then pull over a little bit so the oncoming car can get around you. So it calms the traffic, but it definitely is not as pretty for a streetscape.
Well, you know, what you said earlier, I don't think was a big problem years and years ago. I'd rather see cars on the street today than I would on the yards.
Yes.
Okay, where before, you know, only mom or dad drove, he worked, mom didn't. Now it's a little different. Now you got everybody working, and you, like you said, if you had 2 kids, you're going to have 4 vehicles. All right, 2's going to go in a driveway and 2's going to go in the yard. In other words, you rather have them on the street or have ruts in the yard. And to me, I'd rather have them on the street.
Well, and you know,
The
at
street
that
is wide
time,
enough.
well, when we went through this before, we used to only have concrete drives or asphalt drives. So we allowed the driveways to be wider, and then when we allowed gravel. And so you can extend your driveway with gravel, which is fairly inexpensive. So that was our resolution to the problem back then.
Yeah, but the problem I see going forward is if we allow parking on the street in the older parts of town and stuff, you're going to have a problem. I mean, we're going to have to change what our street widths are going to be in order to allow parking on any new additions.
Yeah, and I think that's all part of looking at the entire streetscape from, where the entire right of way is, how much of it's paved, how much of it's sidewalk, how much is grass, where are the trees going to go, and look at it all as one big piece. So that way, and have some different options available for developers, but have a few that they can find something they like.
Well, I think it's important to have some grass between the sidewalk and the curb, just for pedestrian protection.
Well,
I agree with that.
And not only for protection, but it also allows for a little bit of room between the street and the sidewalk, and you can actually see the green opposed to the white sidewalk or black, whatever it is.
Well, that, and I've noticed when you have sidewalks right up against the road, people just park on the sidewalk.
Yes, they do.
I remember before it being a problem too, like when there was a sidewalk and a driveway, it seems like we wanted it to be so they didn't park their cars so it blocked the sidewalk. But boy, that's really hard to enforce.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be blocking the sidewalks at all.
Well, my guess is the only time that we can enforce or would enforce would be during the daytime. And my guess is that the problem don't occur during the daytime, it occurs during the night or the evening. And so I would think we'd have to have something to alleviate that situation during the day. I mean, during the night, I'm sorry. Because you're not going to call a person out at 8 o'clock at night, you're an inspector, and say, okay, go there to my house, 520 Turtleback, and tell them to get their cars off the road or off the yard. But you will during the day.
If it's posted no parking, the police officers are supposed to take care of the parking tickets.
Well, Sandy, Little League here has got parking signs, no parking signs up and down the road. And there's not one car that don't park behind them.
And that is one of the most dangerous areas there is, because there's kids running out between those cars and you cannot see them. But
as a matter of fact, I've seen police cars parked there.
Is that part in the county or is that in the town?
It's in the town now, I think we annexed it, didn't we? Sandy, you remember that? Or anybody?
Kevin, are the ballparks down on Park Street in town? I think they are.
Yes, they are.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So then, we can't enforce it ourselves as planning and zoning. We need to pass it along to the people who can. Go ahead, David.
Were you talking to me?
You want to comment on that?
Not really, no. I mean, parking regulations are very difficult to enforce. And once you start, where do you stop? I mean, if you're going to do it as strictly as it should be for everyone, it's going to take a lot of time. And it's going to create a lot of mad people. And I think my experience in the past has been, if you start to aggressively enforce parking restrictions that have been there for a long time, people get very riled up and go to their political representatives, who then decide that, gee, maybe that's not really such a good idea after all. So I mean, there's a lot of aspects to that other than just the police department.
Yeah, but they would be a lot more upset if our child got hit because they run out between two cars and you can't see them.
That's true. I'm just kind of telling you what the realities are.
Yeah, I understand.
Your take on street parking, David? Do you have an opinion?
I mean, I have said for years, and I've asked this question for years, why do we not make the streets big enough to have on-street parking like they do in a lot of other places? Obviously, the developers don't want to do it because it costs more money to make the streets wider. And that's why it's probably never come to pass. I don't have a problem with on-street parking. I think as long as the streets are wide enough to do it. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, the families today are just not the same as what they used to be. And if we don't provide them with some place to park, they're going to find their own. And we may not like that either.
Yep, that is true.
Hey, you know, and the reason I brought up the ballpark is because there's signs up there. Just because a sign says no parking, or we have a ordinance that says no parking on the street or wherever, that don't mean they're going to abide by them, because they're not abide by them when the police are around. So, you know, we have to make it, I think like David's talking, we got to make it easy for the families. And like you said, the developers are saying, no, you know, I could get an extra lot out of 5 acres if I don't have wider streets. Well, that's not our problem. That's their problem. You know, if we have an ordinance that says, yeah, you can park on a street if the streets are 24 feet wide or whatever they're supposed to be to have it, you know, then they have to abide by it, like they abide by what we ask them to do now.
Kevin, what's your take? What do we need to do to enable on-street parking?
Well, I think the way we are growing it right now, we are in a position to ask developers to do some of the things that we think would be beneficial for the town. And if on-street parking is one of them, then I think we can ask them to do it. There'd be quite a few ordinances have to be updated to make that where it would fit. So right now, I'm not sure that our streets are wide enough, so we'd have to tweak the paved width, and in doing so, you may have to increase right of way, because if you make the street wider, you're going to cut down the area for the sidewalk and the grass between it and the tree lawn in between the sidewalk and the road even further, to where it'll really be tearing things up. So there's a few different things to look at, but I mean, it can be done.
Well, I think it's worth looking into. And, you know, as far as going back and changing the streets that are currently in, I think that's going to just be a major, major undertaking. But I think going forward, any new ones we approve ought to be required to have the wider streets in them.
Yeah, I don't think the plan would be to go back and change that for a lot of our older streets. The only way we could do that is through the community crossing grants, provided the state keeps giving those. It does give some money to do that kind of work in addition to repaving them. So that may be something to look at for, you know, smaller areas. But I think looking forward is kind of where I'm at right now with what
good.
our ordinance should be.
Yeah, because our older streets, like my development, and I don't know about yours, Sandy, but we have no sidewalks.
No, I don't have sidewalks.
Yeah, so, you know, if you put a sidewalk in, you'd have to take down half the front yards and trees and everything. And I don't think that you know, that fly. First of all, I don't think we got the money to do it, even with grants. So.
Well, is there any other things that anyone would like to discuss? Russ?
Yes, I'm wondering what other towns our size are doing currently with the subdivisions they are approving, get my mouth working, with regard to street width and sidewalks. The world is constantly changing. Sandy brought up a good point that families today have more vehicles than families are 50 years ago. Ellettsville, that has been built today, is basically an old horse and buggy town. Old Ellettsville is a horse and buggy town before we even had a vehicle. got with stuff, what's been developed and approved today. The question is, what is consistent with what other towns and cities are doing and what they approve today, looking to future needs?
Thank you. I've been extremely quiet tonight. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think the safety, like getting safety vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, that has some effect on that. They've got to have enough room to get through there. And if we're going to look at street size, parking on one side or parking on both sides, we've still got to have enough room to get vehicles through there in an emergency.
Yeah, even if we did decide to have future street parking, I don't think there's a lot of streets in town. Current older subdivisions couldn't accommodate it. So some of them would have to remain no parking, and just the newer subdivisions, we could work toward that option.
I got a question, and it's never been brought up, but it's not through the planning or anything. This is my own question per se. Grants. Let's say like for trails. Kevin, can you tell me what procedure that goes through from step one till the end of it?
It's a very long procedure. We've done
Who
some
starts
grants
the procedure?
of applying for the grant. Usually comes out of our office, and we'll meet with the town manager and kind of figure out where we're going, base it off of a comprehensive plan. Denise is working on putting together a parks and trails plan and figure out where, figure out what our needs are and what areas look like good areas that we can get a trail in.
When does that come to, or if it comes to the planning department?
I don't think that comes through planning. It'll go through council at some point.
It would be kind of nice to be aware of grants, that are proposed or being applied for, just to have an idea of what's going on or what could be. Not that we'd have any input, it'd just be nice to have that information.
Well, the reason I ask is if a subdeveloper or a developer comes in with a subdivision, he comes to the planning department first, okay? With a grant, I'm just using trails. I don't know what else grants could be used for. That don't come to us. And to me, that is part of planning for the town. And I don't understand why it wouldn't come to us to see if how we feel about it, if it's part of the town, or should it be there, or should it be someplace else, or whatever. I don't understand that. So if somebody could explain it to me, I'd appreciate it.
Well, with the trails, that would typically go through a parks board or a parks department. That would almost always fall under that department, since we don't, we have a parks board, but that's all we have. So things kind of fall in between. But yeah, there's so many different things between trails and parks. You can get CDBG money for infrastructure and stormwater improvements if you qualify, which I'm not sure if we do, and trying to work on that. And Denise works on a lot more grants than I do, but it just depends on what particular needs, how much money is available, how much money we have to put towards it. There's a lot of different things that come into it.
How is the other towns, or how does other towns do it? Do you know?
I don't.
Because see, I'm like Sandy. I like being part of the planning department. I would like to know what's going on in our community. If we're going to have a new baseball diamond or a new park at such and such place, and it's through a grant, I think as the planning department, we should be aware of that.
And Don, I think there is some, Kevin could explain this better than me, but there is some degree of information when you're applying for a grant that you have to keep a little bit confidential just so that you don't give too much out to your competitors, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
Kevin?
understand.
Oh, yeah. And you know, there's another thing that I miss. Before we had a planning department, the variances to our codes would come through the plan commission and then be referred to the BZA. And I understand now that Kevin has clarified that that's no longer necessary, but it would be nice to maybe get the agenda as a plan commission member for the BZA meetings so that we're a little bit aware of what zoning changes have been requested or variances have been requested. And I know that Terry and Pat serve on that committee. So could you give us a quick synopsis of what transpired, your issues and the outcomes at your last meeting? Just a quick take on it.
Well, the last meeting, Terry, was you there?
Yep.
Wasn't it the one on?
Okay. It was a request for a variance for development standards to allow construction of an accessory structure within the site distance of the triangle, 321 South 2nd Street, Ellettsville,
Yeah.
Indiana. Petitioner James O. O'Donnell. And what he wanted to do is build a building to put his store his equipment in. And where he was located, there was absolutely no way he could put anything in there to store his equipment. So therefore, looked at it, there's a ditch on one side and a curvy thing. The alley is a real curvy. And so ultimately the BZA granted the variance.
And the one before that, Sandy, was a rehab
Facility.
yeah, I'm trying to think, where was that though?
Oh, I did hear about that one. That one made the news, I think.
Yeah, we
it
made the
did.
news on that one. And
Yeah.
prior to that, I can't remember.
Okay. Well, thank you. I was just curious.
Now, you
And
know,
with the BZA cases, we do have to be kind of careful in talking about them beforehand. I mean, I have no problem with sending agendas and packets out, but it's hard to discuss those before because the way the state has the Board of Zoning Appeals set up is it's a quasi-judicial board. And Darla probably can explain this better than I can, but I'm not going to ask her to unless you want her to. But we have to be very careful with what we say and how much detail we go into beforehand.
But as far as the agenda goes, that could be sent out to the planning and zoning so that they could listen in on Zoom, right?
Yeah, there's no problem with that. We just have to
Sure, that's
know to put it. Go ahead.
there's no
Darla?
problem with that.
Well,
But the board members, like Kevin said, it's a quasi-judicial board, which means the folks who serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals, you serve as, your position is similar to a judge in a state court. So you are not supposed to confer with people, confer with the petitioners. You can certainly read the staff report. And if the petitioner or remonstrator submit materials, you can read those, but you are not supposed to be discussing the issue with other people, anybody, prior to the hearing,
yeah, well, I know.
other than your lawyer and of course your planning director.
Yeah, well, I know I get emails from people about stuff all the time about stuff that's coming up on planning and zoning and BCA. I never even open them because I don't want to read them because to me, I don't want my opinion affected by one person's emails. And not only that, legally, you're not supposed to look at them.
Well, that's all very interesting, and I appreciate the input from you, Darla and Kevin. So I would appreciate getting the agenda just so I would have an idea, and I'll try not to comment on anything to anyone.
Just remind me tomorrow and I'll make sure to put you on the list. Get sent out for the agendas.
Okay,
Kev-
thanks.
Kevin, have we had any kickback on fencing, our fencing zoning?
You'll find that out tomorrow.
Pardon me?
You'll find out tomorrow in the staff report I send out.
I don't get the staff report. So,
Well,
And, I would like to add too, I don't mean to cut you off, Kevin, but Sandy, what you asked for is on our website. So if you do go to our website, I'm looking at it right now, the Board of Zoning Appeals gives the members, it has the agenda for the upcoming agenda and things like that. So just FYI on our new site.
Well,
Sorry.
thank you.
Mhm. Sorry.
Sandy, I thought that I'd put you on my list that I send agendas to, but I will double check.
Okay, thanks. And I apologize for not checking the website. I need to get much more acclimated with that new website.
Yeah, it's very nice and we all need to get used to it and start using it more often.
I'm not doing as good a job as planning about getting the things posted on there, my agendas and that type of thing. Old tricks are, I don't even know the term I want to refer to. Well, is there anything else? Russ, did you have a comment? You'd had your hand up earlier.
I was just going to comment that we're seeing more and more construction in the Jackstafeet Creek floodplain. And I did a rough analysis of some data I've accumulated that shows that our population density per square mile in the Jackstafeet floodplain is increasing, which I would expect it to be. The problem is, so is our impervious square footage per square mile. Now, we're getting the same amount of rain per inch of rainfall going into the creek, but we've got more of it trying to run off quicker because we're rapidly losing our forests and pastures. Now, I'm wondering if there is something we should start doing for future construction to limit the amount of impervious surfaces, the percent of impervious surfaces within a parcel of land by percentage or square footage? Or should we be requiring pervious pavement? I don't know, but I think we're going to, I really appreciate what the town's doing with flood control, but that's not going to mitigate if we build ourselves into another corner where the water's got no place to go. And I don't know whether this was appropriate for the planning, the town code. I'll leave that up to Kevin and Darla. But 50 years from now, if we completely build out the way we're going, no matter what you're doing for flood mediation right now through old Ellettsville and going up the creek to the north, you're still going to have a worse problem, because in a heavy rain, you're going to have more and more water trying to go through a limited channel.
well, I think the biggest way that gets addressed is through the drainage, retention and detention ponds that go in with subdivisions, making sure that those are adequate and that the stormwater drainage is adequate to keep the runoff at the same level that it was pre-construction, which is what it's supposed to be by code. I'm sure it never quite works out the same, and that's something we really, the best thing to do is increase what we require as far as the detention and retention, which will get some pushback.
Yeah.
other thing, I mean, there's two other things. Pervious pavement is helpful. I see a lot of positives and negatives to it. I don't know if that's really going to be super beneficial. Another thing would be to reduce parking requirements in commercial areas, or have some of it be gravel or something of that nature, which would be considered permeable. So I guess that would work in that. I mean, there's a few different ways to look at it. I do know, well, I found this out today, IDEM is redoing a large portion of their MS4 program, which is the municipal stormwater system, something. I don't know what it all stands for, but what it turns into is we're going to have to, I will probably be doing most of the work on this, is redoing our stormwater section in the ordinance, mostly just off what the state tells us we have to do, which from my understanding is going to be a lot more restrictive than what they allow now, which I'm sure will go over great. But if that's what the state's making us do, then we don't really have much choice.
Well, in this area and all areas, we have to follow what federal and state code is. So our hands are somewhat limited in what we can do. But that is one of the major things 50 years from now, people are going to look back at what we did or didn't do for our town and see, were we proactive? We're going to see electric cars. I'm not sure how that is going to affect town planning. But I think it's pretty well certain that the gasoline combustion engine will not play the major role it does today. And then we're going to have the issue of recharging stations, which I'm sure Duke Energy would like to charge us a bunch for. So there you go. Go ahead, Sandy. I've talked enough. Sandy, you're muted.
I kind of like her new tone of voice there.
So it's not just me. Everybody can't hear her.
Nobody can hear her.
We can't hear you, Sandy. Still can't.
Come on, Dan. I know you got the mute button off on her.
I would love to have a mute button for her, but it never worked. I think you're probably going to have to. Are you the host, Sandy?
Yeah, she's the host.
Look under your host settings and see if you've accidentally muted yourself.
Nope.
There you go.
There you go.
No, that wasn't her.
No.
Oh, that her.
Somebody else.
That was Evelyn. I'm going to mute.
Okay. So, Sandy, switch the host over to somebody else.
All right. Well.
So, Kevin, can you unmute her?
I can't even find her now. It's not muted.
Sandy, why don't you log out and come back in? Try that.
She shows muted on my phone.
Yeah, she shows muted on my screen too.
Oh, I know. I
think Kevin muted me. Can you hear me now?
I'm trying to mute her. It won't be.
Very low.
Barely. Turn up your volume.
Say something. No. Why don't you log out and come back in? There you go.
I'm in now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, if we're all done talking, we could adjourn the meeting. What do you say?
I'm game.
Could I have a motion?
Well, one thing, next meeting is January the 7th.
Oh, yes. Kevin, did you have anything else to add?
no, we will have a meeting in January. Got one subdivision in today and expecting another tomorrow.
And I'd ask Pam if she had any comments, but no one could hear me ask. So Pam, did you have anything to add tonight?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. All right. All right. Then I guess we are ready to adjourn. So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
We got lots of seconds. Denise, I think we need a roll call.
Sandra Hash,
Yes.
Terry Baker,
Yes.
Don Calvert,
Yes.
David Drake,
Yes.
Pam Samples,
Yes.
Dan Swafford,
Yes.
Pat Wesolowski.
No, let's stay on. Yes.
You all have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Yes.